Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror anthology from Argentina, Spanish language English subs, released in the year 2016, directed by Federico and Sebastian Rothstein, and this film is called Terra Cinco. So Terra Cinco is 5 stories told over one evening in Buenos Aires. You got stories that range from a group of college kids who are seeking vengeance upon their teachers, who they deem as their fault for them not passing their grades. You got a group of friends who bully one particular friend to a point which pushes him over the edge, that has dramatic consequences. 2 men are waiting for a mysterious person. You've got a group of zombies who come back from the dead to wreak vengeance on the government that betrayed them. And you've also got 2 lovers who go to a hotel and don't realise that they're actually being spied upon. And so all these stories conclude in a nightmare that is about to put the lives of everybody involved in great danger. So how these stories transpire is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Terra Cinco. As far as Latin American cinema is concerned, this is something I love. I have a very soft spot for Latin American cinema and Argentinian cinema in general. For those of you who know me, I have an Argentinian wife. I lived in Argentina for 2 years, and so it does play a very strong role in my life, and so I always go out of my way to watch films from this country. And so there are a lot of good films from Argentina. It's a very underrated area of the world as far as cinema is concerned, but it's very hit and miss. Is that there are a lot of great Argentinian cinema and there's a lot of bad Argentinian cinema, and there is no more example of this in the horror genre. Is that there are some really good ones, but there's some really bad ones as well, and so you're not quite sure what you're getting yourself in for. And so when it comes to Terra Cinco, I didn't know what to expect. This movie came out in cinemas in Argentina about a week before I left back to Australia, so I didn't get a chance to watch it in local cinemas, and so that was a little bit of a disappointment, because I actually thought this looked very interesting. And so it took me quite a few years later to actually get the opportunity to watch it, and so expectations weren't very high, but because I love Argentinian cinema, I had a lot of hope. Is that okay, well, hopefully this is going to be a movie that's going to entice me to recommend it to everybody else, because if I can expose as many people to Argentinian cinema as possible, especially horror, then that's a very good thing. And so Sebastian and Federico Rothstein are 2 directors that I really haven't been experienced with, and so that was another level of intrigue that I had, a lot of curiosity. Is that what were they going to bring to the table? This is a horror anthology, and I've reviewed a lot of horror anthologies lately, and I thought, alright, well, is this going to be just another horror anthology, or is this going to be something a little bit different? So there's a lot of questions out there that begged answering, and that's something you want from a movie-going experience. You want the questions, you want the curiosity to entice the viewer to actually go and experience it. And so after watching Terra Cinco finally, I will say that although it's not a brilliant movie, it's still a film that I would recommend if you get the opportunity to see it. I wouldn't say race out there and get it, because the movie doesn't have enough memorable qualities to actually stand out on its own. But as far as horror anthologies are concerned, you can do a lot worse, is because although it does have a lot of things that you've seen before, the way it tells its story I thought was actually quite different, and that's something that I can really applaud Sebastian and Federico Rothstein for doing, is that they weren't just copying a lot of horror anthologies out there. This is a horror anthology that's not 5 separate stories. All these stories have something in common. What they have in common is that it takes place in Buenos Aires on one particular evening, and all of these stories intertwine simultaneously. And so I felt as though it was one story told from different perspectives. It wasn't just a collection of short stories told by different directors. Is that these directors, these brothers, they direct everything in the film, and so I felt, all right, well, it's breaking it into 5 segments. It's breaking it into 5 perspectives, and so it never felt like they were short films. It never felt like short stories. Although the ideas were different, it still felt like one big film, and so it was trying something a little bit different, and that's something I liked. Also liked the fact that it had a level of seriousness to it. It wasn't a film that was lazy. I thought as though it had a political message without getting too political. Is that as far as Argentinian government is concerned, there are a lot of problems, and not just Argentina, but Latin America in general, especially in today's society. There's a lot of problems as far as government's concerned. There's a lot of unrest, and so this the message that these directors are sending in this movie, I thought was actually more relevant in today more than ever. And so without it trying to get too political, it's not hitting you over the head with it, but it's giving it a reason to exist, not only for being a popcorn sort of horror film. And so that's something I liked as well. It's just a little bit of seriousness to it to actually elevate it to a mature sort of level, and so that's something I liked. But first and foremost, foremost, it wants to be a horror film, and I think it succeeds in being a horror film. There are some very creepy moments in this. Some of these horror set pieces are very creepy, and I thought some of the stories worked very well, but unfortunately, as is the case with a lot of these types of movies, there were some stories that didn't work quite as well, and so I thought it was a bit of a disjointed experience. And so you've got the acting, I thought was very impressive from very little known actors outside of Argentina. You've got some very impressive cinematography. It's a lower budget kind of film, but it felt like it had a lot more to it because it was very self-aware. It wasn't trying anything too extravagant to a point of making it look cheap, and so that's something I liked. And it's a very nasty film too. There are some very, very nasty moments, especially one involving a hammer that I'm not going to give away. And there's also some sex in it, some gratuitous sex, and so it is a hardened kind of horror film, but it never really elevates it, and it doesn't really go to excessive levels. And so that's the reason why it shocks you as much as it does, is because it is few and far between. It uses its aces very wisely, and so you don't become desensitized to what's going on, and that makes it even more of a higher impact. So you've got some moments that were actually quite funny as well, and there were some moments that were very, very thought-provoking. But as I said, the thought-provoking material isn't playing center stage. This is a movie that's not trying to be political, but it has that political and that societal message underneath it all, to, as I said, to give it a purpose, and not just being another one of those popcorn sort of horror films that just don't have any meaning behind it, as other than just an easy cash grab. And so I felt as though this movie had a lot of love, but as I said, the problems to the film is that I thought the opening segment was quite weak, and so it doesn't really start on a great level, but then it gets better and better. But as I said, there are some moments that I didn't really like, and it felt as though it kind of dragged the film down a little bit. It was a little bit disjointed. The fluency didn't work quite as well as I really wanted it to. But overall, as far as Horror Anthology is concerned, you could do a lot worse. I thought it actually blended together fairly well. It was a fairly impressive experience. It's an experience that I wouldn't say go out there and rush out to see. I wouldn't go out there and track it down, but if it does happen to come by you, then there are definitely worse ways you could spend 80 minutes. It's a fun film, but it's a film that can make you think as well, especially in the times of Latin America right now. So overall, for Terra Cinco, it is a creepy film. It's a very nasty film, and there are some moments that I thought actually brought a lot of scare factor. So if it sounds like your kind of thing, you could do a lot worse. I'm going to give Terra Cinco 3 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next, thank you for watching movies, and I'll see you later.